Thank you very much, Dr. Agarwal. And that was a wonderful lecture. I was not sure about how the case discussion was going to be, so I do not have much questions for the panelists. I will just go through the case and tell you why I chose to treat this patient the way I treated. I think we all understand today that CML is a model disease in oncology, and we are very fortunate to have so much of bedside to bench and bench to bedside going on to help our patients with CML. If you look at our calendar, we talk about BC and AD, but when we talk about imatinib, this BC and AD is BI and AI. This is before imatinib and after imatinib. This slide you already saw from Dr. Ilyas Jaber, and this actually is telling us how much we have progressed in CML. These are essentially the goals of treating our patients of CML in chronic phase. And these are the drugs that we have today, some of which are approved for first line. So to my case, this is Mr. A, a 45-year-old male who presented with history of abdominal discomfort for 3 months. He had a massive splenomegaly of 20 centimeters below the left costal margin. His hemogram was this. Cytogenetics was a classical translocation 922, and it was easy for us to make a diagnosis of CML-CP in this patient. And I started this patient on dasatinib, 100 mg OD. So the question is, why not imatinib? And sometime back, I did a debate about use of second-generation TKIs as first line, and I quoted Dr. Jose Cortez. And this is, again, I want to quote that he said, if I myself had a disease, a second-generation TKI is what I would use, and that is why I would offer that to my patient who is newly diagnosed with CML today. This is, again, to just tell you the various mechanisms of action of the various TKIs that we have, essentially showing you the various pathways that they block. And if you see the 4 ones that we have, all have no action on T315I. So my first thing is to achieve a good response. So to choose between nilotinib and dasatinib is nothing much because the response is the same. The second point is progression to accelerated phase of blastic crisis. This again for nilotinib and this is for dasatinib. Again, it is very, very similar. And we're looking at treatment-free remission, which is an important issue for CML patients, which you already heard. And this is a summary of all the discontinuation studies which have been published till date with nilotinib, all showing very similar outcomes. But what's important to remember is the toxicity spectrum of these TKIs, and that is why I looked at my patient as to what I would want to use. So this is the side effects with nilotinib, and this is with dasatinib. Specific differences in toxicities are seen, and why we look at this is because we want to maintain the quality of life of our patients. So back to my patient, he has diabetes mellitus for 15 years on oral hypoglycemics. His present HbA1c 7.5. His hypertensive for 10 years on treatment, well controlled. He's hyperlipidemic on statins for 5 years. He has a history of acute pancreatitis 1 year ago. His mother and father are diabetics and on insulin. This was the ECG that was taken at his time of presentation. And as you can see, his QTC was prolonged. We did a complete cardiac evaluation and echo, everything was normal. After some time, we repeated an ECG and the QTC was normal, in fact. So this, Dr. Ilyas already told us that the incidence of cardiovascular events with nilotinib is an important issue. And this is a slide talking about follow-up of these patients over 72 months. And as you can see, the cardiac events definitely are increased over this period of time. So for my patient, this is an important issue, and therefore I did not choose to use nilotinib for him. So this is just summarizing the various side effects of the TKIs that we have. And this is an important slide for me to look as to which TKI I will use for my patient. Other important thing is more than 50% of patients with CML have at least one other disease at the time of diagnosis, and these are listed here. And people have looked at what's called the morbidity burden. And this is to show that almost 11 to 12% of people have more than 2 comorbidities. And why is this important for all of us is because survival of patients with CML is determined by comorbidities than by CML itself. So I think this is one aspect that most of us need to keep in mind. Sometimes we tend to ignore some of these comorbidities, and this becomes an important issue. And based on all this, based on the points that I want to treat my patient this way, I chose to use dasatinib. So thank you for your patient listening.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal.
Thank you, Dr. Govind Babu. Dr. Shekhar, will you like to give some comment on this case, our chairperson, Dr. Shekhar? If no, then there are certain questions which I would like to put to our panel this time before asking Dr. Ilyas. One of the questions is, when you do the mutation studies, how often you get a mutation in your practice? So out of panelists, anybody can answer. Can I put it to Dr. Bhave, Abhay Bhave? When you ask for the mutation studies, how often you get a positive mutation result?
So thank you very much for that question, and thank you, Professor Ilyas, for a beautiful presentation, and Govind Babu for your case. So of the 24 that I have done in the last year, I've had only 2 people with a mutation.
So 24.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a higher incidence.
Right. Will others like to chip in? Dr. Anita Ramesh, Dr. Jenna, Dr. Ramanan?
Dr. Agarwal, we did a study some time back of mutations in about 240 patients, and this was at the time of their losing response to imatinib. It was almost 32%, and we've actually published that data.
42%. Okay. Others? Any experience with it?
Yes, Dr. Jana here. Dr. Agarwal, good evening.
Good evening.
So we did about 150 cases in the failure, imatinib failure who have advanced also. Again, it is around 7 to 8% I got the mutation positiveness. Around 7 to 8% only.
Dr. Rahul? Dr. Sachin?
Yeah, so same, sir. We have done a different kind of a thing where if there is no response at 3, the early molecular response at 3 months, the rate of pickup was 7% out of 20 patients. So not responsive to imatinib, it does not mean, but on imatinib, if the BCR-ABL was not less than 10% at 3 months, so 7% was our pickup rate.
Right. Rahul?
Yeah, so we have almost got around 10% of individuals who had these mutations. We have a set of 50, rate of 50, out of which we got around 6 patients who had mutations. So we have a data around 10%.
Dr. Ramanan? Vijay? Are you there? And is Dr. Anita Ramesh there? Okay, then let's have the comment from Dr. Ilyas now. Very variable mutation pickup. What may be the reasons?
Excuse me?
When they look at the mutation data after the resistance to a particular TKI develops, as you heard that there was very variable results from very low pickup of 6-7% to almost 30%. What could be the reasons?
It depends how much disease you have, and you check for mutations, because with the Sanger technique, the sensitivity is only 20%. So you're checking for mutations, somebody with very minimal disease, you're very unlucky to find anything. In contrast, if somebody had a lot of disease, then the likelihood could be quite high. In our center at MD Anderson, the rate of mutations in chronic phase is about 30%.
Right. One question that is asked by Dr. Gopinathan is that after treating a patient of CML on TKI, the platelet count dropped to very low level and it is not coming up. What to do? Whether you will use steroids, whether you will use Eltrombopag, or whether you will just wait and watch. So Indian faculty would like to take this?
First of all, I can take it. First of all, you have to hold treatment and wait for some time to recover. If you have waited for decent time, let's say 4 weeks, you still count and not recovered, we use it in this on Eltrombopag with some mixed results. But I would reduce the dose of dasatinib, for example, after. If platelets are above 50, I would reduce the dose and maybe use 20 milligrams and see how it goes.
Yeah, this is Dr. Rahul. We had almost a similar case where basically there was persistent thrombocytopenia. So we stopped the drug and we started on steroids. did not increase. We tried our Trompo-Bac, did not increase. In fact, we had to give that patient IVIG. So that was after a lot of debate, and the platelet counts came up. We re-challenged that patient again with a lower dose of a different TKI. So that is our experience.
Right. The next question asked is about use of ponatinib in Indian scenario. So I may just take it up myself. Ponatinib is not officially available at the moment in India, and it is a bit expensive. So the use has been very minimal, basically because of its non-availability officially. The other question is to Dr. Govind Babu. Dr. Karim wants to know, why did you not start your patient on imatinib?
Yeah, I think I already told why I didn't start imatinib, because of the various reasons that we do have affordable second generation TKIs. And I'm actually convinced that using a second generation TKI is better because you have faster and deeper molecular responses. And since we are looking at treatment-free interval, that's why I would choose a second generation TKI upfront.
Sir, can I make a comment here?
Yes,
yeah, because I also thought that, if you look at your SOCAL score, it will be high.
Yeah.
So the data is quite robust for second generation for a higher SOCAL.
Yes, that's
it may be inferior.
Yeah, in fact, we have actually published a paper on the SOCAL and UTA score, and we've also shown that most of our patients have very high UTAs and SOCAL scores. So that's why most of our patients, if they can afford, are getting second generation TKIs.